All right, everybody, welcome to Ropeadope TV here at the Ropeadope Room in East Philadelphia. My name's Fabian Brown. I'm here with Lewis Marks.
Hello, hello.
And
good to be here.
It's great to be here. We are going to dig down. We're in our 20th year, and we are peeling it back to some highlights over the past 20 years to give some insight, some things that I may not even know about Ropeadope, because I'm here with Lewis, and he knows just a little bit about a little bit.
I'm the Ropeadope Wikipedia at this point. Yeah.
The Wikipedia.
Don't even go there. Too late.
So we're coming in with I guess the band that set the tone for the last.
Well, yeah. Let me jump in there.
Yeah, please.
So we're gonna talk in these shows about some highlights of Ropeadope's 20 years.
Okay.
Probably, I guess we're gonna record maybe eight or 10 of these coming out every 2 weeks until November, which is the official 20th anniversary of this thing called Ropeadope. And I thought that one of the most interesting points and a great place to start would be the story of Snarky Puppy.
Interesting.
A lot of times people will ask me, how did that happen? So I thought I'd kind of run down some of the stories and how it went.
Well, I do have a bunch of questions, and maybe for the audience who are just coming here for the first time, or maybe just jumping in, what's this thing, Ropeadope? Like you said, coming in our 20th year here, and so where does Snarky Puppy fit in that 20-year timeline? Where exactly? Where is that at? What point?
Well, I'll set the stage a little bit with a tiny bit of personal history. So,
okay,
I'm in Downingtown, Pennsylvania,
okay.
2006 or so, running a clothing company that is making clothing for Ropeadope, OK Player, Daptone, Def Jux, Duck Down Records, DJ Shadow, Al Green, just on and on, right? Blue Note. And in the process of that, I became, intimately involved with Ropeadope, and then as we rounded 2006, that was a very challenging time in the music business, and so I jumped in to help Ropeadope move forward.
Okay.
Had no intention of being at the helm, in retrospect, but we're at the office, and we had a group of interns. We had a robust intern program, people coming from Temple, Drexel, Berkeley, etc. But at that time, a lot of people would come to the office every day. So I'm at my desk, and for some reason, a publicist decided to email me instead of the A&R department. And Ropeadope has always had a website right from the beginning with stories. So I think this publicist viewed us as a news outlet, not so much as a record label, or maybe they were carefully playing it. But the email that came in was, this is who Snarky Puppy is. Of course, you're going to notice that name immediately. Right? And they're playing at a place in Philadelphia tonight called The Fire. Would you like some tickets to come down, and could you write a review about the show? So I read the email, and I look over at one of the interns. Name was Tim Lutz. And said, hey, Tim, because I know he lived in Philly, he went to Temple. I said, do you want to go to a show tonight? And he's like, yeah, sure. I said, you have to write a review. He said, okay. So he went down to the show at the Fire, and he was one of 5 people in the audience. Right? I come in to work the next morning, not really thinking much of it. There weren't demos or anything in the email.
Okay.
Just maybe some online links for previous records, but it wasn't about making a record. And he came in the next morning so excited. I knew something was up. I was like, something's up. I'm older, he's younger. I said, how was the show last night? And he's like, just amazing. I'm like, well, how many people were there? He goes, well, 5, including me. And so I emailed back and said, what's going on with this band? And he said, well, we're recording our next record. at Dockside Studios not New Orleans, I believe it's in Lafayette,
Okay.
Louisiana, and they invited us down to come and see the recording. So this is what became Tell Your Friends, the record.
Wow.
Right? So I think the first video and audio companion record that they did,
and
right?
You were there.
I didn't go.
Okay.
This is not my role,
Right.
right? So
You're the clothing guy.
A&R, the founder guy, went down, came back very excited, and we signed the band.
All right.
So that's Tell Your Friends.
So at that recording session, Tell Your Friends, I mean, I'm familiar with that lineup. What is your experiences with some of those music? Well, what is the experiences that came back? Was there any intel on the personnel that was there, or was it just like we just signed the band because it was a powerful music? What was the decision? Was it just the vibe of the band?
Yeah, well, it was Andy. He came back really excited. He said, "Good people, good vibe, really exciting. Really unique and interesting way to present what they're doing because they're putting out a DVD with this album, and we should sign it."
So what comes next?
So we did.
So Tell Your Friends gets picked up.
And I gotta. This is important because we're right here with the history, and it's easy to look back in retrospect and have the timeline flattened out because you're like, depending on when you heard about Snarky Puppy, you might think it was just like overnight sensation kind of a vibe, right? They already had 3 or 4 albums out,
Okay.
right? And so Tell Your Friends came out, and it was an interesting time because we got into creative ways to market the band. They were touring relentlessly. They were touring, so they came back to the Fire or another Philly venue the next year, and there were 50 people. Right? Because every person in the room told 10 people and brought them out. You know what I mean? So, and they were doing the circuit of like Lafayette and Birmingham and Montgomery, Alabama. They were doing a really unusual circuit.
So it's still like 2007, 2008 now we're in, or
No. We're well ahead. That was that event. This album I believe came out in 2010.
Okay.
So I gave you the history of 2006. It was a couple years until Snarky Puppy emailed, and then another year until we're ready to release Tell Your Friends. And we really didn't. I don't think we were fully versed on the rich history of the band and the players. To answer your question,
at that time.
Yeah, I guess at the time you didn't dig as deep, or maybe the internet wasn't as efficient as it is now. Do you know what I mean? You saw the credits and you saw who's who. I think the vibe at the time was this is a rotating cast. So they were early on presented as a rotating cast of sort of a collective.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right? So you weren't really sure exactly who was in the band, right? But let's talk about that because we recently had a visit from Mr. Philip Lassiter. So let's drill backwards. Philip brought in a DVD of his band, Country Fried Soul Band or something, playing with Snarky Puppy. And so, it's all in printed word, but as I've gotten to know the people involved, Michael League playing at UNT with some super talented people and obviously a really driven, excited composer with an ear for like all kinds of music at UNT. Phil said that he met Michael, I don't exactly remember where, but it was up in Denton, I believe, not down in Dallas.
Right.
And said, you ought to come down to Dallas. And the response was, well, there's no real scene down there. And he's like, oh, there's a scene. Come on down to RC's gig. The Wednesday night jam, right? DFW jam, right?
DFW
jam session, right? So, and that's where all those people connect. So you have two different worlds connecting, right? you have some kids up at jazz school,
Right.
and then you got cats who have a gospel / hip hop / R&B soul / jazz background. You know, Sean Martin, Corey Henry, RC, Spud Seawright. And Spud, you know, perhaps one of the most influential figures in that process because he's a connector, you know? So Michael Lee used to tell the story that he came down, and I think it's in one of the DVDs, where he's just like, you know, he met these guys and was like, hey, do you want to be in my band? And they were like, yeah. And he was, wait, really? You want to be in my band? And they're like, yeah, let's do this, you know? So I think that's what, you know, that Tell Your Friends is that first where they're all together in that space, right?
Well, you nailed it, right? So Robert Spud Seawright here, Nate Worth was in that iteration, Sean Martin, like you mentioned, Mark Lettieri was in that group as well, Bill Lawrence.
Mark was at UNT, right?
Yep.
Well, Bill was not. I don't think Bill was around at that moment, was he? Is he on that album? Incredible.
Bill was on there.
And so there's some key people too, like Bobby Sparks.
Bobby Sparks.
Is he on Tell Your Friends?
I don't think Bobby was on here. I didn't see him. Hold on.
So I think Bobby was on some of the earlier, or maybe on an earlier record.
Nope, Bobby wasn't.
Or maybe on a later record. And you know, Lil John Roberts was in the mix at some point with Snarky Puppy as well.
Wow, this is crazy.
Right? Tayron Lockett, know him from the Dallas scene. And Bob Lindsay, a lot of the familiar names. And shout out to Eric Hartman. Rest in peace for working on that. So
you had mentioned that you know depending on when you caught the wind of Snarky Puppy, you know, some people may perceive it as an overnight success, and we all know that's never the case, right? So they had a few albums before they came to Ropeadope. Your partner at the time went down there, checked it out, signed them, came back. Tell Your Friends was pushed out the door 2009, 2010, somewhere
2010,
around 2010.
Yeah. We had no idea, man.
I mean, you had
like
no something.
that there was. We liked the people.
Right.
The music was refreshing. Obviously accomplished. The video concept was interesting.
Right.
And the band was touring relentlessly, and Michael was just an energetic and excitable dude. It's kind of like when they talk about startups, you know? It's like you believe the guy. You know, you could see that in his eyes that it was like, this is gonna work.
Right.
But we didn't know. And honestly, from 2010 to 2012, it's a grind. And not that it's ever not a grind.
Right.
But it's a grind. You're like, you know, I mean, and we have the receipts to prove it, you know? Like, you can see how challenging it was, you know?
Well, what were some of the things along those 2-3 years that you can contribute towards the success of them ultimately getting to being nominated and Layla Hathaway and all
Right.
that process? What were some of the things that they did right and some of the things they did wrong?
Well, before we jump ahead to the breakout point, right? They were touring relentlessly.
Right.
Social media was really in some very early stages.
Like baby stage, right.
So on Facebook, the band is communicating. People are flocking to the Facebook page to connect after the band leaves town.
Okay.
And then here at the label, we're communicating with fans. Right? It was kind of a new thing. Like, let's just talk to the fans.
Talk to the people.
You know? Let's mimic what they're doing in real life on the
Online.
internet, right? So you could see that grow, but it was slow and steady. So we round the corner into 2011, 2012, and I get a phone call from Michael, and he's like, "Look, man, we got an offer. We're gonna do our next record somewhere else. I spoke to Andy, and he was super cool, and really want to thank you for the work that you've put in, and we're gonna do this." And I was like, just 1 second.
Okay.
Like what? And this is a really key moment for me because as I became more involved in the business, it's a collaborative moment that lives to this day, where my intent is, sure, and honestly, with how things are going at that time, I wasn't like, oh my God, I have to keep this band, right? It was, tell me what's going on in your world, how you're managing, why you're taking this offer, and let's see if we can't collaborate and do the same or better together. Right? So he talked about wanting to have his own label. He's got other people. And I was like, well, why don't you just do the label here? You know? So that's one. And he's like, okay. So there's a possibility, right? And then, we're like, let's look at the numbers. What are people offering and what do you need? And how can we earn that same amount of money without giving up any kind of control or presentation, right? Well, and Michael, who's never had a cup of coffee in his life, is driven. He's not just driven in controlling the music and keeping control of his composition. He wanted to keep control of his business.
Right.
And he did. So, we came to an agreement to release GroundUp on Ropeadope. So next record, to release the album GroundUp.
Okay.
And to start the imprint GroundUp, who the first artist was Philip Lesser, by the way.
Get the heck out of here.
Right? Yeah. So
that's funny.
Here we are. We're still doing it. Now, at this time, I'm personally in full-on crisis mode.
Okay.
Right? My clothing business had to close. Personally getting a divorce, moving to another city, and I'm literally collapsing this label to working out of, say it on camera, out of my bedroom.
Right.
No, I didn't even have an office.
Right.
Get up in the morning, walk over to my desk, make sure before I got on any kind of video call that I was actually dressed, and do the work, right? And packing orders in the basement. Like, that's where Ropeadope was at that moment, right? Because of many circumstances. So, now at that point, it really wasn't long, right? So the period of 2012 to 2013, GroundUp hits, and the band had been playing to 5 and then 50. Now they're playing to 150 consistently in a lot of places. And that video on GroundUp, they recorded everything up in New York. Can you check it? Was it at the bunker or was it? No, it was at Shapeshifter Lab, right? And the album GroundUp to me represents a perfect moment where all of the influences of the players from the Dallas scene and the Denton scene are at their peak. And I don't mean peak to say that what came later is not as good. There's just some chemistry there. And you know me, I like to balance the exploration part of it over perfection sometimes.
Yeah.
Right? We're going to do a show on that. So 2012, right? And I think that album came out in the early part of the year, or maybe late 2012. What's the release date again?
Let me see. That's the track listing, press the personnel. That's not correct. Oh, 2012. You're right. Tell Your Friends 2010, GroundUp 2012.
Right. So things start to accelerate at this point. GroundUp is gaining, and people are raving about it. And I want to point out that the entire time that this is happening, I am hammering the press. I'm sending this off to jazz magazines who will remain unnamed, but shouldn't, and saying, you need to pay attention to this band. You need to pay attention to this band. Like, here they are. They're back again. Here's GroundUp. Let's go. These are the credits, And I'm getting crickets.
Nobody's responding.
The occasional thing here and there, but the as previously unnamed publications that you really desired they're just like, I don't get it, right? And then that was with the F word, fusion. It's like, that's not a thing, right? Why are we going back to fusion? Why would we do that? And then you're going out to the shows and you're seeing kids just
eating
it up. And I think a lot of it had to do with, like, they could look at the stage and see people like them.
Right.
There wasn't a barrier of, like, I'm an accomplished jazz musician and you're not. It was, I'm an accomplished jazz musician and I'm wearing a Ringer t-shirt and I'm having a good time.
Right.
You know, and, you know, I'll cut my hair sometime. I don't really care when. You know what I mean? That kind of a vibe, right? So there was a lot of that. And then really super fast from GroundUp, I remember we came back around again to family dinner. And the call was there again, like, I've got somebody to put up some money, you know, it's gonna cost this much, you know, and I said, Michael, you know, bring it in, let's put it in a spreadsheet, let's talk it through, let's figure out how this is gonna work. And then a lot of legwork went into working the budget out, balancing it with pre-sales, talking to the Jefferson Center, who were amazing, but also to the board. There was a little bit of a communication process between excited musicians, driven musicians, and this is my role as a board member. You know, I must protect the foundation kind of a vibe. But everybody was good, and we got it done. So when we rolled into, I remember being at World Cafe, spring.
Okay.
And Michael grabs me and goes, come here, and we go into a room at WXPN, and he pulls up a video. And he's like, here it is, look at this. And it was Shayna Steele Gone Under from Family Dinner. And, you know, jaw-dropping. You were like, oh my God, now this is powerful. So they played upstairs at World Cafe that night to a packed house of like 175 or so, 200, right? And then September, they returned. That was May.
Okay.
They returned in September and filled downstairs. At 800 seats. Right, and that's prior to the Family Dinner release. It's like right at that time. So then Family Dinner comes out, and we're submitting. You know, the label is submitting to the Grammys, and then the nomination hits, and then momentum achieved. And I know we can talk about this for days, but I see the clock is down to the end.
I'm looking. I mean, maybe we can close out with just. You know, if you were to take some of the tenets that Snarky Puppy, that Michael League, that the whole gang, the whole crew, not just on the stage, but everyone working behind the scenes, if you could take some of their, you know, their philosophies or their business practices, you know, and give some advice out to some up and coming guys, how, could you sum that up in a sentence or two? What they should be doing, or something that they did that they can apply that's still practical from 2012 to 2019.
Absolutely. Collaborate. Be open to collaboration with other musicians, with business people. Own your shit. Don't let it go. And communicate with your fans. You know? And I want to say, you know, in looking back, Snarky Puppy had moved on after We Like It Here. We didn't even get to that point. And that came out the following... that came out probably 5 months after Family Dinner. But, you know, wrapping it up with the final communication for us, I mean, not final in a business sense, was like, well, you know, we're going to move on. We're going to take this and we're going to be fully independent. And personally, I'm like, you know, that's kind of a bummer. I'm sad about that. And then business-wise, you look at the books and you're like, wow, you're really earning some money. I'm kind of sad about that. But at the end of the day, when I look back to the beginning, where the intent was help independent musicians own their thing and have their own power. And it proved out the model that I had set out
Mission
to create
accomplished.
5 years before.
That's
it was like,
fantastic.
yes, you know. And then, of course, I spent some time thinking about, do I want to continue with that model? But, and yes, I do, right? Because that, and you know, I'm happy.
Wow, that's great. I learned a lot. You know, this is just you know, part one of many. You know, I don't want to say behind the scenes, but kind of peeling the layers of the onion back of what this crazy thing of Ropeadope, what this crazy thing called Ropeadope is. I'm glad to be a part of it. We kicked it off with Snarky Puppy, guys. Hope you enjoyed the tunes. All of the information will be in the credits. Subscribe, click the notification for bells, you know, spread the word, leave some comments, and talk to us, and let us know what you're thinking, how you feel. And Louis, thanks for the spot on the sofa, man.
Thank you, Peyton, and thank everybody out there.